Law and order are powerful tools wielded by those in very high positions, and they are extremely difficult to balance. But one man in Magic the Gathering specifically wields the gavel with precision, justice, and most importantly maybe, kindness. He's the noble hero, GIDEON JURA, and he's kind of everything that you wish your own government probably was. Somehow, and maybe it's because it's fantasy, this cop ain't that bad. Seriously though, he's absolute peak, right? A warrior who came from pretty much nothing in the story and gave everything to defend the entire multiverse and everyone that he cared for, and honestly, even those that he didn't care for. Hands down, GIDEON is a character that I've always been absolutely fascinated by because pretty much on all metrics, he's not the type of character I usually tend to really love, but man, I just can't help but respect the hell out of him. So today I wanted to spend some time, Jesus, this is a long video. Today I wanted to spend a lot of time with you to dig more into his crazy lore and truly understand the heroic rise of Kytheon as he became one of the mightiest planeswalkers ever, GIDEON JURA. Kytheon, the Noble Thief. And no, you did not mishear me there earlier. GIDEON is not his real name, or more so, it's not always been his real name. His tale actually starts in the slums of Akros, located on the Greco-Roman mythological plane of Theros, which I absolutely love because I actually had to study Latin and ancient Greek in school because my parents thought that was a good thing, and in retrospect it was really cool, but you can imagine if you're in middle school or high school, it's not like the most fun thing, and that's kind of what got me to fall in love with mythology to begin with throughout my entire life. So count me in whenever we're going to Theros, and here we meet the little rascal Kytheon Jura, a young man who was forced to grow up way too fast. Big dog here had no papa, no mama, and where most people would, embrace this lack of order, Kytheon created it. He actually forged a noble street gang built on all of these fancy Robin Hood ideals, stealing from the rich, giving it to the poor, and basically systematic redistribution. Very socialist of you, good sir. But as we all know from the real world, true heroes like this are tanked down by the structural elite. So eventually, Kytheon was of course imprisoned. However, he had a lot of potential. His goals weren't scummy at all. They were actually very earnest and very kind. So instead of rotting in the back of a prison cell, Kythy Boy was taken under the wing of Hixus, a hieromancer who taught him order magic. And as a student now, Kytheon discovered discipline, purpose, and greater power. And surely somewhere in there, Hixus also taught him a lesson about great power and great responsibility. That kind of feels right. And we do have Spider-Man in the universe now too, so hey, it's, I guess, canon. Anyways, before I get into the part of Kytheon's story where a full-on Greek tragedy happens, yeah, dude, if you are into literature and mythology, ooh, this video is for you. Can we just also, before we do that, take a minute and ravel into how sick hieromancy is, right? Law magic. I know it's not an original concept as this is an actual principle in our real world, in real life. Hieromancy has an interesting etymology that wizards actually played off to create law magic. Also, in case you were curious, since I did study ancient Greek, hiero is derived from the Greek prefix which translates to holy, and mancy, that you always kind of see on the end of any magical words, is actually just a Greek word for divination. So real-life hieromancy is, well, just holy divination based on interpreting sacred objects and ritual sacrifices. But in Magic the Gathering, since white mana is also holy mana, right? Hieromancy takes on a different role as embodying the spirit of white mana's other meanings: law, structure, order, and also purity. Hence Kytheon studying it since he's always been a really stand-up guy. Cool. Now, here is where it finally becomes a pure Greek tragedy. Kytheon spent 4 years under Hixus's guiding hand, and this was a very interesting dynamic because Hixus was the prison warden of Colophon, a military fortress. And just like all great fantasy fortresses, looking at you, Helm's Deep, Colophon was attacked by harpies and cyclopses. So Hyksos made a very bold call, freeing and arming the prisoners who were willing to actually defend it. And you just know that the top dog, Kytheon, led the entire charge. He started slinging spells, wielding hieromancy like a Vaskenrudvala tank, by the way, and he brought the hammer of justice down. The gavel bashed. They were sentenced to pain. Their rights were forfeits. So yeah, basically Kytheon was their judge, their jury, and their executioner at the same time. He left that courtroom in shambles. Sorry, that's enough law puns for now. Now, once all of that wrapped up, the god Heliod, yeah, that Heliod in your life gain deck, that guy himself took notice, and the sun god gifted Kytheon a divine spear. Now, as you can imagine, this was not exactly a normal gift. It was a vow given to Kytheon so that he could slay a titanic menace, the Titan of Erebos. God, I really want to get into this, but this video is already so long. One day, if you want to see it, I'll get into all the crazy gods of Theros, but long story short, for the, not going too overboard here, Sun God does not like Death God, and so Kytheon was divinely hired to slay a big bad henchman for the Sun God. Praise the Sun God, boys! Praise the sun. And so, as he should, Kytheon succeeded, but his victory was a massive ego booster. So Kytheon said, "Now watch this drive," and hurled that spear at the god Erebos. What an idiot. The god just flicked that spear away, and it launched straight into Kytheon's irregulars, the prisoners' army that he had led here. Every single one of them just died in an instant. Now this tragedy, the repercussion of Gideon's hubris, unleashed his spark. Surrounded by the burning corpses of his former comrades, he ascended, but was absolutely crushed by shame. And he then made his first very uncontrolled planeswalk to Alara, a golden storm of order surrounding him. Funny, I actually never noticed that he went to the banned section of Alara specifically because it's the shard of Alara that is aligned with order, honor, and community. Anyhow, Kytheon was now no longer himself. Kytheon was the man consumed by ego who led to the killing of all his friends, so Kytheon shed his own name, and thus the hero of legend, Gideon, was forged instead. Order's greatest warrior. Gideon Jura and the Purifying Fire. So, now what? Gideon killed all his butts and dipped, so where did he go next? Well, in the timeline, next up for our boy of justice is the novel The Purifying Fire by Laura Resnick. It's a very good read, I'd strongly recommend it to you, and it was the first time we actually saw Gideon in the real world. He actually was a character created for this story about Chandra, so we can actually piece together what happens from the novel and then the revised origins that Wizards gave him to kind of blend him better in the story. Essentially, after leaving Theros behind, Gideon Jura hears whispers of something extraordinary on the plane of Regatha. There's apparently a massive fountain of white mana known as the Purifying Fire, and it's guarded by a bunch of heliomancers known as the Order of Heliod. Now, to be clear, the Purifying Fire is no joke. It could rid the soul of all sin and had the power to delete a mortal, or if they were a fancy planeswalker, it could drain them of their divine powers. Meaning, of course, no more funky planeswalky sparky fun. And I think we can all agree that's like really strong. To Gideon, this sounded like enlightenment, discipline, divine clarity, basically white mana nirvana, right? And he will become its Dave Grohl. The Order's leader, Walbert, aka the Order's Kurt Cobain, right, wasn't too eager on letting Big Gid here poke around. Since Gideon wasn't from the plane, it was kind of unwise to trust him, which I would agree, so he instead requested that Gideon track down this very annoying pyromancer named Chandra Nalar. Now, Gideon being Gideon, he finds Chandra almost immediately, mostly because she leaves a trail of destruction everywhere that she goes. Turns out that fire is not exactly discreet or subtle as a magic type. Have you ever considered order, Chandra? I've heard it's very simple and very clean. So anyways, Chandra had stolen the Dragon Bolt, the Dragon Scroll, and leveled a sacred sanctum in the process. Now, Gideon tries to help here. She does interpret that as arrest, and that's pretty fair. Gideon gives off pretty strong cop vibes at first, for sure, so they end up clashing. He knocks her out, she wakes up, she's very pissed, and then they run around a bunch of planes and end up hanging out with vampires on Diridan. I think arguably my favorite part of all this stuff is that a vampire prince tries to suck out Gideon's planeswalker spark after Chandra made a deal with him, and then she just casually decapitates that prince. The two finally team up, then they unteam up after it's revealed that Gideon's actually working with the Order of Heliod. A lot of book plot happens actually. Again, I just don't want to spoil it all because it's such a fun and good read and not that central to the overall plot, so it's a little bit of a fickle balancing act here. TLDR here, Walbert Cabane reveals that his goal is that he plans to throw Chandra into the Purifying Fire to cleanse her. Gideon is horrified and in an act of redemption finds some ancient texts that explain the Purifying Fire doesn't work on those who have no regrets. He actually tells this to Chandra, who then spills her deepest woes and secrets, and then is actually spared. And then promptly levels the chamber where the Purifying Fire actually was. Gideon finds her unconscious inside the ruins. He actually offers to cover for her, still clinging to the idea that the Order is redeemable, but then Chandra reveals something really messed up to him. The soldiers who had killed her parents believed in the same Order as Walbert, and since Gideon stands with that ideal, he stands against her. So the two separate, and Gideon just assures her that they would meet again, but a thought started echoing inside of his mind. What if order isn't always justice? The bigger picture. Okay, so we've gotten through the personal origins and relationship section here. For now, it's time for the part that I was expecting would happen a lot earlier in the story, the first set that I knew Gideon was truly playing a massive part in. And this is about the time in the story that Gideon realizes the multiverse is way worse than his own personal drama. Despite the way that things ended with Chandra Nalar, Gideon just could not shake the guilt. He done messed up good, and he really wanted to fix that, so naturally, instead of processing those feelings like a healthy person, Gideon chased her down. He would apologize if it was the last thing that he would do, and so he followed Chandra to Zendikar. And Zendikar is a sick plane, man. The land itself is always moving as part of a process known as the Royal. Continents shifting, the land breathes and feels kind of alive. Big ruins are everywhere, giant hedrons floating around. It's just such a cool aesthetic that is just as Magic the Gathering as it gets. I'd love just a video game that's in Zendikar, kind of Breath of the Wild style, running around, you know, the ruins, exploring stuff. Ugh, so good. Anyhow, back to the story. Right. Her trail leads Gideon towards the Eye of Ugin, a secret prison deep underground, hidden in secret, but what was the prison actually hiding? Well, I'll tell you in just a moment, you probably already know, but I kind of want to keep some of the suspense up still. So, Gideon lost her scent, and since he was a little bit of a sleepy boy who traveled across the multiverse a little bit too much, Gideon took a break, stopping off at Fort Kef. Gideon hears whispers about the land itself growing violent. Something is very wrong here. That night, a wounded Surakar, aka this big lizard guy, warns of gods from the colorless void who will devour everything. Surely that's not a good thing for order, right? So the next day, everyone keeps talking about these demonic insects that are plaguing the lands, and later that day, the vile brood swarms the fort. Gideon stands proud. He's a wall, and this wall hits really hard. He leads the fort against these insects with his individual presence. They're actually able to absolutely manhandle the big old demon bugs here. They had won, they were triumphant, they were safe. And then Emrakul eclipsed the sky. You thought you were safe? No. Emrakul. God, this is so sick. I don't know. I'm weirdly obsessed with Emrakul. Maybe just because it's fun having something with Annihilator 6. And poor Gideon was going to see the Eons torn in her full glory. Gideon orders everyone to flee underground and stare up at a being so vast it makes the gods of Theros look absolutely tiny. Just for once, brute strength isn't gonna be enough. He could not punch away this problem. He's actually defeated. But order will be restored. At least I kind of assume that's what he finally told himself deep down to cope with the crazy trauma of an eldritch horror blotting out of the sky. Needless to say, Gideon needed some real help and he went hunting for it. He had heard rumors of a powerful group of planeswalkers on Ravnica, presumably the Infinite Consortium, and so Gideon leaves Zendikar, accepting the harsh reality that his shield was not enough. Gideon's guild issues. As I said, Gideon made his way over to Ravnica, a plane where the main planet is essentially just one massive city. Honestly, I think that sometimes we don't give planes themselves enough credit because each plane basically is pretty much a universe still. It's just that one key planet is where we tend to focus most of our attention on, and probably even a region on one of those planets. 10 guilds formed a pact aptly named the Guild Pact, which acts as the governing body in Ravnica, realizing very quickly that the planeswalkers that he's been searching for are nowhere to be found. Instead, he finds something way worse, a really stiff, hard, and passionate tension, guild tension. And it's at an absolute boiling point. Paranoia is spreading, and all the poor folks who are guiltless are stuck right in the middle. Now, Gideon is suddenly facing a war on two different fronts. Zendikar is facing quite literal annihilation, but a full-on guild war on Ravnica could even dwarf what is happening on Zendikar in terms of just pure casualties. You see, Zendikar isn't that populated thanks to the whole royal thing that moves all the land masses around all the time, but a massive guild war in Ravnica could quite literally kill millions. And so Gideon makes a very big call. Postpone the search for buddies right now and instead try and stop active war on Ravnica. After smashing through a group of people of the Cult of Rakdos, one of the guilds here, Gideon's impressive showing catches the eye of Aurelia, baddie angel and leader of the Boros Legion. Great card, by the way, also. And she offers him rank, power, and command. And Gideon is kind of left in a bind here. He doesn't love Boros, but he's also aware that they are like the most cop group on the planet, and Gideon's oddly pro-cop for being very anti-capitalist, I will say. He's a bit weird. I don't fully get his politics, honestly, but regardless, Gideon isn't so pro-cop that he's straight up in line with Boros, so while he does accept leadership of a battalion, he refuses to join as a straight-out member. Crazy that's something that they let him do, but hey, I guess Planeswalker, crazy law, magic user is a pretty big asset to have on your side, even if he doesn't have the exclusive official membership card. To me, my GATEWATCH. So, as you might imagine, it's really kind of hard to balance two collapsing planes at the same time. I mean, better time management, I guess, Gideon, but he's kind of starting to get a handle on Ravnica, but it's still not going too great here either, and he really needs those other planeswalkers. Specifically, he needed the coolest and most mind sculptoristest wizard around, Jace Beleren, who was acting as the living guild pact on Ravnica. Yeah, in case you didn't know that, that's a thing, which is very cool, in which essentially Jace is magically able to make laws happen on Ravnica. And since Gideon was a sort of almost part of Boros, he was able to bother Jace despite the governing body's best efforts to stop him. Gideon burst into Melena's, a very fancy restaurant that Jace just happened to be on a little dinner date at with Liliana. Now, as you can imagine, this was not exactly the ideal place for a very large warrior guy who reeked of dead demon bugs, but alas, them's the breaks. Gideon had learned from the scholars' archives of the Seagate that there was a secret to defeating the Eldrazi, and it lied in Zandakar's Hedrons. Remember, these were these massive floating stone monoliths that were originally designed to imprison titans like Ulamog and Kozilek. Somehow, the Hedrons are connected by ley lines, magical natural paths that do exist in Zendikar, and Gideon pleaded for Jace's help, who got really excited about puzzles. Specifically, this leyline puzzle, because it turns out that Jace was the one who was accidentally responsible for unleashing the Eldrazi back on Zendikar, so after a spout with Liliana, Gideon recruits Jace. And then the duo goes to get their next party member, Chandra, and to literally no one's surprise, she refuses. You know, the whole purifying flame thing, you allied yourself with the people who killed my parents type of stuff, was still a little bit of a problem, it turns out, for her. So the two lads just went and headed back to Zendikar, to the Seagate, which had already fallen to the Eldrazi Scourge. Gideon hears that Jori N, a merfolk who told Gideon about the Hedrons and the ley lines, was in big danger. So Gideon rushes into the Seagate to personally save her, hoping that her merfolk's insight can help Jace reconfigure the Hedron network. When Jace and Jori determine the solution lies at the Eye of Ugin, Gideon makes a very pivotal choice. He decides to stay. While the scholars chase arcane answers, Gideon organizes refugees. He fortifies, he commands, he becomes a true general in full, and then he does something very bold. He decides to retake the Seagate, but to do that, he of course needed a team. No, more than that. An army. And so, armed with nothing but a shield and a dream, Gideon rallied the people of Zendikar. And I mean, like, pretty much all of them. This dude's got charisma, that's for sure. Veterans, farmers, vampire clans of Malakir, hell, some frozen Sajiri, all rally to his side. The powerful words for Zendikar were truly mighty and compelling. So compelling that even Noyan Dar and the royal mages who manipulated Zandikar's chaotic elemental forces couldn't help but get a piece of the action too. Now, one of my favorite moments from this little chunk of the lore is what Gideon says when he saw the ragtag army that he managed to form. He simply muttered, "Gideon's irregulars," with a smirk. He failed his Theros army, Kytheon irregulars, those who rallied to his side. They fell because of his ego, but not these people, not those of Zendikar. He would do right by Gideon's irregulars. And then the real heavy hitters arrive. Kiora brings merfolk and sea monsters. Out of the blue, Nissa Ravane, a powerful planeswalker representing green mana, the power of nature itself, comes to Zandikar's aid too, channeling Zandikar's elemental fury. Sick! New party member, and together they drive the Eldrazi actually from the Seagate and start rebuilding its defenses. The Seagate actually was reclaimed again. And surely this would then also help Jace solve the big puzzle. I mean, everything was going well, the ball was rolling up. Ulamog would change that though. There was very little time for a new plan, but they all locked in. Gideon and Kiora held the city while Nissa raced some ancient Hedrons into a massive ring, and with his magics, Jace activated them. Somehow, this trap actually works. They had managed to contain Ulamog, one of the top 3 Eldrazi Titans. Until Obnixilis came and crashed the entire party. Stupid Obnixilis! Not only so annoying as a card, but also as a character. In case you don't know, he's a demon planeswalker who likes making copies of himself. He had some beef going on with Nissa, and that kind of sucked then for the entire gang. He ends up summoning Kozilek and shatters the Hedrons that had already been formed. He defeats Gideon, Jace, and Nissa, and the fool then thought even that he'd managed to kill Gideon, but nah, he was just captured and tortured. They were trapped, and Zendikar would now surely fall. But in the nick of time, who came? Who do you think you came? Yes, the Raging Inferno, Chandra, appeared. On her own, she manages to free them, and the 4 planeswalkers finally unite. Together, they drive up Nixilis off the plane. Gideon screamed, "Avengers assemble," probably, and then that was that. Together, 4 mighty monocolored planeswalkers had united in defense of the Sea Gate and Zendikar. This is, of course, how the mighty Gatewatch actually came to be. Standing in the aftermath of this devastation, Gideon, Jace, Chandra, and Nissa learned that together, they were actually pretty much Titans themselves. So what do? They swear an oath to stand united against threats that no single planeswalker could face on their own, like all the enemies ahead, including the Eldrazi. Bound by a promise that he made to Ugin, the spirit dragon, to end the entire Eldrazi threat, Jace proposed a very dangerous solution. Together with Nissa's help, he designs this very sick leyline pattern to anchor Kozilek and Ulamog fully onto Zendikar, making them vulnerable. Essentially, up till this point, they've been like fingers poking through the planar barrier, and their cores were still very much outside of the plane, hidden within the blind eternities. Gideon leads the defenders, acting pretty much as bait, holding off endless swarms of Eldrazi, while Kiora commands the seas. And when the Titans begin assimilating the plane itself, Chandra channels her pyromancy through Nissa and Zendikar's leylines in a single apocalyptic inferno. The Titans are incinerated, their ashes falling like black snow. 2 of the 3 Titans were finally slain. Thank God. And then Gideon, like a total homie, stuck around to help rebuild Zendikar a little bit, because what a stand-up, nice guy he is. 2 down, 1 to go. So there actually was peace. But not for long, suckers, because Jace Beleren sensed the presence of the last Titan, Emrakul, on the dreaded dark plane of Instrat. So the Gatewatch planeswalks together to Instrat, and just like Zendikar, the plane here too is to bind this new Titan with leylines. Should be super easy, barely an inconvenience, right? Yeah, I thought so too. As the ritual begins, Eldrazi horrors start swarming. Gideon Jura, the living beefcake wall, plants himself between this horde and his team, a very classic Gideon move at this point, but even he is overwhelmed until... who is that on the horizon? She's sleek. She's sexy. She's Liliana Vess. Probably still pretty mad about Gideon crashing her dinner date with Jace, Liliana realizes the situation and sends a massive army of undead soldiers straight at Emrakul. And Gideon, of course, distrusts her immediately, very thematically because their mana colors are opposite, right? Their enemy colors. Gideon represents law, order, calm, the white mana, and Liliana is a master manipulator wielding death and necromancy itself. She cares basically 0 for law and order, even though she's a big fan of the show. But since Jace has dug into those ley lines, if you catch my drift, he actually vouches for her to Gideon, and since he's about to die if he doesn't get over his little grudge here, Gideon remembers that his ego once already killed his comrades before, and decides to actually trust Liliana. Then Emrakul starts getting real freaky inside their own minds. Gideon finds himself trapped in a vision, confronted again by Idibos, the death god who killed Kytheon's irregulars, and the god demands his true desire, threatening his friends. None of Gideon's answers satisfy him. One by one, he watches the Gatewatch fall, and he's forced to relive his deepest trauma, failing the people that he swore to protect. That's real rough, buddy. Luckily for Gid though, Jace is a mind breaker, so he breaks the illusion, freeing Gideon from the strife. And in a very powerful display, Gideon rises and holds the line, while Jace, Nissa, and Tamio, who, yes, has been here also the entire time, seals Emrakul inside of Instrad's moon. After their victory, Gideon actually offers Tamio a place amongst the Gatewatch, commending her for her clutch save, but she actually declines this offer, and if you want to know more about that, my Tamio video explains everything about her crazy story. Really love Tamio. So since apparently he really wanted a fifth member of the Gatewatch, Gideon does something very unexpected. He offers the fifth spot to the goth mummy, Liliana, instead. GIDEON JURA, humanity's shield. And so, the stage is finally set. The Gatewatch are all living in a big apartment complex, except Liliana, who's too cool for that, I think, and the biggest event in Magic the Gathering is fast approaching. The Hour of Devastation and the War of the Spark. When rumors placed Tezzeret, an agent of Nicol Bolas the Elder Dragon, on Kaldesh, or as it's now known, Avishkar, as I found out, the Gatewatch arrives to solve the case. Also, mostly because Liliana just saw him, that kinda helps, and the full squad arrives here, led by Big Gid, just as the Inventors Fair explodes into chaos. In a split decision, they side with the Renegades, who are fighting against the Order of Kaldesh, and as you might have guessed, this strains Gideon a lot. Having stood on both sides of the law before, he wonders if working within the system, the governing body of Kaldesh, and with a powerful figure like Dovin Ba'an might just have been smarter. That way, they might have just been able to expose Tezzeret from the inside. But once again, having some serious history here, Chandra sees no distinction between tyrant and system. Hell yeah, Chandra, you go, but unfortunately, Gideon pushes back. The Gatewatch isn't here to just impose judgment. If they now just suddenly started toppling entire governments because they think they knew better, they'd be no better than the Conquerors to begin with. They then also learn from Saheeli Rai that Tezzeret has actually sealed himself inside the Ether Spire, which in Fold allowed him to perfect the Planar Bridge, a device able to connect planes together. As you can imagine, that's like uber powerful. They need to stop Tezzy here, so Liliana and Saheeli infiltrate, while Gideon coordinates citywide strikes to stretch the consulate forces thin. Also, realizing the governing body has actually been enabling Tezzeret, and so they are no longer that good in his eyes either. Also, during the massive assault, there is a really cool moment where Gideon, using his shielding, stat-boosting law magic, goes indestructible and destroys a rampaging Gear Hulk from the inside out. I just kind of wanted to call this one out specifically because it's just so rad. And then the OG power duo returns because a Rufflethopter meant to disable the planar bridge is shot down, causing Gideon and Chandra to pilot it themselves. So Chandra detonates the construct while Gideon shields them with his Heromancy, and the bridge is destroyed. Woo! Go team! But unfortunately, Tezzeret still escapes, and after the revolt, Gideon invites a Johnny Goldmane, who was also there the entire time by the way, to join the Gatewatch, and together they decide if Tezzeret serves a big bad master, then there is only one way to settle this. It's now time to strike at Nicol Bolas himself, and I don't really like where this is going. So, the Gatewatch planeswalks onto Amonkhet, the Egyptian-themed plane that Bolas has now become God Pharaoh of. They land in a desert crawling with undead and worms, and even some undead worms, I assume, and in the chaos, a divine figure intervenes, and it's kind of rat, dude. Like, something steers in Gideon Jura. In Noctamoon, the Gatewatch come face to face with the figure who has intervened, the god Okitra, a deity of stability, order, and protection. And she finds some true solidarity in Gideon, even calling him by his birth name, Kytheon Jura. And for the first time since defying Erebos, Gideon feels true devotion once again. Order had stood true. He pledges himself to the trials of the 5 gods. They were trials of ambition, knowledge, solidarity, strength, and zeal. Basically, these 5 cards. Gideon fell into the crop people devoted to these trials and begins to see cracks within the system. The aspirants leave wounded behind. Who does that, right? And then comes Bontu's trial. She straight up demands sacrifice. The crop obeys without hesitation, slaughtering their own. Gideon, of course, refuses. Bontu calls him faithless, not heretic, and in doing so, he realizes the very horrifying truth. The anointed that he was trying to become a part of are simply the dead, preserved for something much darker. So he skedaddles. Gideon reunites with the rest of the Gatewatch and vows to save the dissenters. And then Nicol Bolas arrives. The Gatewatch is annihilated. Gideon is broken, disarmed, barely escaping. Liliana had fallen short due to her past ties to Bolas and her selfish desires to fight a demon on the plane elsewhere also. And after their defeat, the whole squad kind of just flipped on her and bailed. Now, leaving Gideon and Liliana alone on Dominaria. Now, I know what you're asking. Did they kiss? The answer, no. Instead, he hears Liliana out and learns that she's trying to free herself from 4 demons who she's pacted to, kind of not having control over what she's doing with her life. At this point, though, only one remains on Dominaria. Gideon rightfully thinks that his best shot at defeating Bolas kind of hinges on Liliana, so he fights alongside her against the demon of Dominaria, Belzenlock. They end up rescuing her hometown, defeat her zombified brother Jozu, and join forces with the Weatherlight crew, who I really need to make a video on at some point. We talked about it in the Urza video, but they need their own video. They then learn of the Black Blade, a really sick weapon that devours souls, and Gideon infiltrates Belzenlock's stronghold, survives the fighting pits inside, claiming the blade, and kills the demon himself. What a legend! But in a twist of unfortunate fate, Nicol Bolas comes in to then collect Liliana, whose pacts have now defaulted after killing all 4 demons to him, meaning that she had no other choice but now become Bolas's faithless servant, and Gideon was left alone. So now, with the Black Blade in his hand, Gideon prepares for the final reckoning, Bolas. Gideon's last stand. And so, with some careful planning, the Gatewatch reconvene and prepare to finally assault Bolas one last time. But he was actually one step ahead already, as all good mastermind villains should be, and he begins his final march on Ravnica. The Gatewatch arrives here to confront Nicol Bolas, but something is wrong. More and more planeswalkers are starting to arrive, and they can't leave anymore. Bolas has trapped them using a legendary artifact from his past, the Immortal Sun. There is no escape, no retreat, just war. Gideon the Mad Lad throws himself into it immediately. To his side are Aurelia and the Boros Legion, and he rolls in flying on a frickin' Pegasus. Very thematic, I love it. The Dread Horde floods the city, led by none other than Liliana Vess. Gideon, Aurelia, Angrath, and Houtley actually lead the charge against the God Eternal Ronus. Ronus, by the way. I like this snake, who's just tapping for 1 mana, but then sometimes taps for 4. And he likes Ronus too, apparently. Kinda cool, wanted to point that out. Now, Gideon reaches Ronus amid chaos and drives the Black Blade into the God's Eye, draining his own essence. Meaning, 1 got down, plenty still left to go. Chandra reactivates the Immortal Sun to trap Bolus in his binding spell, and Gideon charges. Oketra shoots Promise the Pegasus from the sky, RIP, and of course Gideon alongside it. Rakdos, out of all people, catches him like a princess, hurling him towards Bolus, and Gideon strikes. The soul-stealing blade kills him and, oh, never mind. Oh, the black blade actually shatters. Apparently Bolus had ensured it could never harm an Elder Dragon. Drats. But Liliana intervenes at this point, sick of being bound by pacts. She knows that her death is guaranteed if she ends up betraying Bolus, but at least she will have freedom from her deal in death. So she turns the Dread Horde against Bolus and began to fade away due to the deal that she had made with the devilish Elder Dragon. Wait, something's wrong. She isn't dying. She's alive. How? Gideon is how. Without so much as a second of hesitation, knowing he couldn't defeat Bolus, he entrusted his comrades, he entrusted Liliana to defeat him, and using his hieromancy, the magic of law and order, the magic of deals and pacts, he takes on the burden of Liliana's falling deal. Her pact is now his, and her punishment for breaking it is with him now too. And so as hieromantic light is consuming him, his body turns to dust. In his final moments, he sees a vision. Alongside the great hero are his irregulars. Kytheon's irregulars. They were always waiting for him, and seeing his actions, they had actually forgiven him. Gideon could now die in peace, trusting the outcome of his final battle to the rest of his comrades, and if you want to see how that unfolded and how this act of insane selflessness and sacrifice impacted Liliana's life going forward, you should really watch her video right here. It's like these stories are so well interwoven, but Liliana's gets even crazier. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and if you have not subscribed to the channel and this is maybe the second or third video you're watching, I'd really appreciate you doing that. Helps out the channel and it's great knowing you're on board. And I will see you hopefully in the next video.